I'm standing in front of a sealed bunker door that shouldn't exist. My hands are shaking as I hold my camera, and I can hear something moving on the other side. Something that's been waiting here for 80 years. 3 days ago, I was hiking through the remote jungles of the Philippine Islands, searching for old World War II sites for my History channel. I'm a researcher, not a treasure hunter. I document forgotten stories. But what I found changed everything I thought I knew about the war. The locals warned me not to come here. They said this part of the jungle was cursed. They said strange lights appeared at night. They said food left near the old battlegrounds would disappear by morning. I thought they were just stories, tales passed down through generations. I was wrong. When I first saw the entrance, it was almost completely hidden by 79 years of jungle growth. Vines as thick as my arm covered what looked like a concrete wall built into the hillside. But there was something odd. The vines near the entrance were cut, recently cut. The edges were still fresh. Someone had been here. Someone had gone inside. I should have turned back right then. I should have called the authorities, but I'm a researcher. Curiosity is what I do. So I pulled back the remaining vines and found the door. A heavy steel door with Japanese military markings still visible under decades of rust. And that's when I heard it. A scraping sound from inside, then footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps. My heart stopped. This bunker was supposed to be abandoned since 1945, nearly 80 years ago. Nothing could still be alive in there, nothing human anyway. I pressed my ear against the cold metal, and I heard something that made my blood run cold. Breathing. Someone was breathing on the other side of this door. And then, a voice. Weak, raspy, speaking in Japanese. The voice said something I couldn't understand, but the tone was clear. It was asking a question, waiting for an answer. I stumbled backward, my camera nearly falling from my hands. Every logical part of my brain said this was impossible, but I had heard it. Someone was inside that bunker, someone who had been sealed in there since the last days of World War II. The local stories suddenly made terrible sense. The disappearing food, the lights at night. Someone had survived in there, for decades, alone in the darkness. I had two choices. I could run back to the village, tell the authorities, and let them handle it. Or I could open that door and face whatever was waiting inside. I'm a researcher. I document history, but I never expected to find history still breathing. My hand reached for the door handle, rusted solid but still intact. As I touched it, the voice spoke again from inside, this time more urgent, more desperate. I made my decision. What I found inside that bunker would haunt me forever. But before I tell you what happened when I opened that door, you need to understand how I got here. You need to know the journey that led me to this impossible moment. Because what waited in the darkness wasn't just a man. It was a ghost from a war that never ended, a soldier who never surrendered, and a story that would force me to question everything I believed about duty, honor, and the cost of loyalty. This is that story, and I need to tell it before it's too late. Before I opened that door, I was just a researcher, documenting the past. After I opened it, I became part of a story that should have ended 79 years ago. Are you ready to hear what I found inside?
My name is David Chen, and I've spent the last 8 years of my life researching World War II history in the Pacific. I'm not a soldier, I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who believes that forgotten stories deserve to be remembered. The Philippine jungle had always fascinated me. This was where some of the war's most brutal fighting happened, where thousands of soldiers from different nations fought and died in conditions most people can't imagine. Dense jungle, impossible heat, diseases that killed as efficiently as bullets. But I came here for a different reason. I'd been researching Japanese holdouts, soldiers who refused to believe the war had ended, men who hid in jungles for years, sometimes decades, still fighting a war that everyone else had forgotten. The most famous was Hiroo Onoda, who surrendered in 1974, nearly 30 years after the war ended. He was found in the Philippines, still conducting military operations, still believing Japan was at war. His story fascinated me because it raised an impossible question. How do you survive alone for 30 years, believing in a cause that no longer exists? But Onoda wasn't the last one found. There were rumors, whispers in remote villages about soldiers who were never discovered, men who died alone in their jungle hideouts, still clutching their rifles, still waiting for orders that would never come. I wanted to find evidence of these lost soldiers, to document their stories, to give them the dignity of being remembered. That's what brought me to this specific island, a small, barely inhabited place that saw heavy fighting in 1944 and 1945. The Japanese had built extensive defensive positions here, bunkers, tunnels, supply depots. Most had been destroyed or reclaimed by the jungle decades ago. But I had found something in the archives, a military report from 1945, written by an American officer. It mentioned a sealed bunker that they couldn't open. The report said the Japanese had booby-trapped it, and rather than risk casualties, they decided to leave it sealed. The assumption was that anyone inside had either already died or would die soon without supplies. The location was vague, but I had coordinates, or at least my best guess at coordinates based on old maps and terrain features. It took me 3 days of hiking through dense jungle to find the area. The locals in the nearest village, about 15 miles away, were reluctant to help. They knew the area I was talking about. They called it the place where ghosts walked. An old man named Miguel finally agreed to guide me part of the way. He was 76 years old, but he moved through the jungle like he was half that age. His grandfather had fought alongside American soldiers during the liberation. As we hiked, Miguel told me stories. His grandfather had spoken about this area with fear, about bunkers that were never opened, about soldiers who were sealed inside with their supplies, ordered to fight to the last man. But there was something else, something Miguel's grandfather only spoke about late at night when he'd had too much to drink. He said that even after the war, even years later, people would find evidence that someone was still out there. Footprints near old battle sites, supplies that went missing from farms. Once, in 1963, a farmer claimed he saw a Japanese soldier watching him from the tree line. By the time he got help, the soldier was gone. The authorities investigated, but found nothing. They concluded it was just post-war paranoia, ghosts of memory, not flesh and blood. Miguel's grandfather believed otherwise until the day he died. He believed someone was still out there, still hiding, still fighting. Miguel left me about 2 miles from my target coordinates. He refused to go further. Before he turned back, he grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "If you find something," he said, his eyes serious, "remember that ghosts don't just haunt places, they haunt people too. Some stories don't want to be found." I thanked him and continued alone. The jungle was different here, denser, darker. The canopy overhead was so thick that even at midday it felt like twilight. The sounds were different here, too. Birds didn't sing here. Insects seemed quieter. It was as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. I found remnants of the war everywhere. Rusted ammunition cases, fragments of equipment, bomb craters now filled with stagnant water. This had been a battlefield, and the jungle had swallowed it whole. I was using a metal detector, sweeping the ground, marking locations on my GPS. That's when I found the wall. It looked like a natural rock formation at first, but my detector went crazy. Metal, lots of it, embedded in concrete. I started pulling away vines, and that's when I saw it. The entrance, the markings, the steel door. And that's when I saw the vines that had been cut recently. Someone had been here, within the last few days, maybe even hours. My rational mind tried to explain it away. Maybe another researcher, maybe locals looking for salvage, maybe teenagers on an adventure. But deep down, I knew better. I photographed everything: the entrance, the markings, the cut vines. Then I approached the door. And that's when I heard the sound inside. The scraping, the footsteps, the breathing, the voice. And I realized that Miguel's grandfather had been right all along. Someone was still here, still waiting, still alive. The question was, how? I stood frozen in front of that door for what felt like an eternity. My scientific training battled against the impossible reality of what I was hearing. The breathing continued on the other side, steady, real, human. I needed to think clearly. I pulled out my satellite phone to call the authorities, but there was no signal. The jungle canopy was too thick. I was alone with whatever was behind that door. My hand trembled as I reached for the door again. The metal was ice cold despite the jungle heat. I could feel rust flaking off under my fingers. The handle was a simple military design, meant to be operated from either side, but it was locked from within. "Hello," I called out, my voice cracking. "Can you hear me?" Silence. Then shuffling sounds. Closer now, right on the other side of the door. The voice came again, speaking in Japanese. I don't speak Japanese fluently, but I recognized some words from my research. Who and American, and something that sounded like enemy. My heart pounded. This person, whoever they were, might still think the war was ongoing. I'd read enough about holdout soldiers to know how dangerous first contact could be. Some had attacked the people who found them, believing they were enemy combatants. I tried to remember the few Japanese phrases I'd learned. "Sensou wa owatta," I said slowly, carefully. "The war is over." "Nihon wa heiwa desu." Japan is at peace. Another long silence, then a sound that chilled me to my core. Laughter. Dry, rasping laughter that turned into coughing. The voice came again, more words I didn't understand, but the tone was clear. Disbelief, maybe even mockery. I needed help. I needed someone who could translate. But I was hours away from the village, and even there I doubted anyone spoke Japanese. The nearest city with resources was a day's journey away. But I couldn't just leave. Not now. Whoever was inside had survived for decades. Every hour mattered. They could be injured, sick, dying. I made a decision that probably saved both our lives. I sat down in front of the door, pulled out my laptop, and opened my translation software. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I typed out a message and played the audio through my speaker. I am not a soldier. I am a researcher, a historian. I came here to remember the war, to honor those who fought. The war ended in 1945. Japan surrendered. Please, let me help you. Silence. Long, agonizing silence. Then, barely audible, a single word in English. Prove. My breath caught. He spoke English. At least one word. That changed everything. How can I prove it to you? I asked, speaking slowly and clearly. More silence. Then the voice again, struggling with English words. Emperor. What happened? Emperor. He was asking about the Emperor of Japan. This was a test, a way to verify if I was telling the truth. I chose my words carefully. Emperor Hirohito survived the war. He renounced his divinity. He became a symbolic leader, not a military one. He lived until 1989. His son Akihito became emperor after him. He abdicated in 2019. Now his son Naruhito is emperor. Japan is a democracy, a peaceful nation, an ally of America. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. The voice spoke again in Japanese, and even without understanding the words, I could hear the emotion, confusion, pain, perhaps grief. Japan, democracy? The English was broken, but understandable. Yes, Japan is one of the most prosperous, peaceful nations in the world. The war has been over for 79 years. You can go home. Another sound from inside. It might have been crying, or laughing, or both. No home, the voice said. All gone, all dead. I tried to interrupt, but he continued. No home, no family, no friends. All dead, all gone forever. I have no home. I understood. This wasn't just about believing the war was over. This was about shame, about a soldier who had been given orders and failed to complete them. In the military culture he came from, surrender was worse than death. Coming home empty-handed after deserting his post for decades would be unthinkable. Listen to me, I said, my voice steady now. The world has changed. Ideas of honor have changed. Your survival is not a failure. It's a testament to your strength. Japan would welcome you home, not as a failure, but as a survivor. You lie. American tricks. I'm not American. My family is from Taiwan. We were occupied by Japan during the war. My grandfather fought, but the war ended. The occupation ended, and now Taiwan and Japan have good relations. The hatred is gone. The war is over. This seemed to give him pause. He spoke in Japanese again, asking something I couldn't understand. I played my translation software again, repeating my message about peace, about the modern world, about how he could still go home. Then he asked a question that broke my heart. How old am I? I did quick math in my head. If he'd been a young soldier in 1945, maybe 18 or 19 years old, you would be around 97 or 98 years old, I said quietly. A sound like a gasp came from behind the door, then sobbing, real anguished sobbing. I sat there, listening to a 98-year-old man cry for a life he'd lost, for a world that had moved on without him, for nearly 80 decades of isolation and suffering. "Please," I said softly, "let me help you. Let me take you home." The crying slowly subsided. Then, after a long moment, I heard something that made my hands shake. The sound of a lock being turned. The door began to open, and I saw him for the first time.
The door opened just a crack, and the smell hit me first. Not the rot or decay I expected, but something else. Damp earth, old metal, and underneath it all, the scent of survival, of a life lived in darkness. A face appeared in the gap, aged beyond measure, skin like weathered paper stretched over bone. A wispy white beard hung from his chin, but his eyes, those eyes were what stopped my heart. They were sharp, alert, the eyes of a young soldier trapped in an ancient body. He was small, barely 5 feet tall, though I couldn't tell if that was his natural height or if decades of poor nutrition had shrunk him. He wore what remained of a Japanese Imperial Army uniform. The fabric had been patched countless times with materials I couldn't identify. Pieces of parachute silk, woven plant fibers, his own ingenuity keeping the uniform together because the uniform was all he had left of his identity. In his right hand he held a rifle, an Arisaka Type 99, still clean, still maintained, still ready. We stared at each other across an impossible gulf of time. "My name is David," I said slowly, raising my hands to show I was unarmed. "David Chen. What is your name?" He studied me for a long moment, his eyes moving from my face to my equipment, to my camera, back to my face, assessing threats, old habits that had kept him alive. "Takeshi," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Private Takeshi Yamamoto, Imperial Japanese Army, 14th Area Army." He said it like a mantra, like words he'd repeated to himself for decades to remember who he was. "It's an honor to meet you, Private Yamamoto," I said, and I meant it. Whatever else he was, whatever he'd done, he was a survivor, a man who had endured the unendurable. He gestured with the rifle, not threatening, but indicating I should step back. I did. He emerged from the bunker slowly, painfully. His legs barely supported him. He had to lean against the concrete wall, blinking in the dim jungle light like it was burning his eyes. "Too bright," he muttered in Japanese, then in broken English. "Too bright, long time, no sun." "When was the last time you came outside?" I asked. He thought about this, his face struggling with the concept. "Night, sometime night, get water, get food, but sun, many years, maybe 20, 30, don't know." 30 years since he'd seen daylight. The thought was staggering. He looked around at the jungle, and something like wonder crossed his face. Trees bigger, much bigger, everything different. I watched him process the changes. The jungle had been thick in 1945, but now it had reclaimed everything. The war was invisible here, buried under decades of growth. "How did you survive? How did you live for so long?" He pointed toward the bunker with his rifle. "Inside, have supplies, food for many years, water from rain, catch through pipe, and jungle, hunt, trap, fish in stream." "But the supplies must have run out decades ago." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Soldier, adapt, learn, survive. Mission is survive, protect position, wait for orders." "What were your orders?"
His face hardened. Hold position. Defend to last man. Never surrender. Wait for Imperial Army to return. They come. Someday they come. The tragic loyalty in his voice made my chest tight. He'd been waiting for rescue that never came, for an army that had ceased to exist before he even sealed himself in that bunker. "Private Yamamoto," I said gently, "may I show you something?" He nodded warily. I pulled out my phone. It still had battery even without signal. I opened my photo gallery and showed him a picture I'd taken in Tokyo last year. The modern city, skyscrapers, neon lights, crowds of people in modern clothes. "This is Tokyo," I said. "This is Japan now." He stared at the phone like it was magic. His finger reached out, trembling, and touched the screen. The photo changed, and he jerked back in surprise. "This is Japan?" His voice broke. "Impossible!" I swiped through more photos. Kyoto, Osaka, the peaceful streets, the thriving cities, children playing, couples walking, life continuing. Tears began streaming down his weathered face. He spoke in Japanese, words tumbling out too fast for me to catch. But I understood the emotion. Grief, wonder, disbelief. The weight of 79 years of lost emotion crashing down on him all at once. He sank to the ground, his legs giving out. The rifle clattered beside him, forgotten. I moved forward to help, but he held up a hand. He needed this moment, needed to process what I had shown him. "My family," he said finally, in English. Have wife, young, marry before war, have baby comin', never see baby." My throat tightened. "What was your wife's name?" "Keiko," he whispered. "Beautiful Keiko. Wait for me. I promise come home. Promise see baby. Promise—" He couldn't continue. The sobs took over. 79 years of suppressed emotion pouring out of him all at once. I sat down beside him and waited. What else could I do? After a long while, he composed himself. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and looked at me with those sharp, ancient eyes. "Keiko alive?" I had to tell him the truth. "I don't know, but probably not. I'm sorry, it's been too long." He nodded slowly, as if he knew but needed to hear it said. "Baby? Your child would be 79 years old now. They might still be alive. You might have grandchildren, great-grandchildren." Something flickered in his eyes. Hope. Terrible, fragile hope. Can find my child. Yes. If you come with me, we can try to find your family. We can take you home." He looked at the bunker, then at the jungle, then at me. A man caught between worlds, between duty and desire, between the past and an impossible future. "If I leave," he said quietly, "I abandon post. I disobey orders. I bring shame." "The orders don't exist anymore. The army that gave them doesn't exist. The war that created them is over. You've served long enough. You can go home now." He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked the question that would change everything. "You show me bunker."
What I guard all these years. Then I decide. Private Yamamoto stood slowly, retrieving his rifle with practiced ease. Despite his age, despite the decades, he moved with military precision. He gestured toward the bunker entrance. "Come," he said, "I show you." I picked up my equipment and followed him into the darkness. He produced a lamp, an old military oil lamp that somehow still worked. The flame cast dancing shadows on the concrete walls as we descended. The bunker was larger than I had imagined, A main corridor branched into several chambers. The air was cool and damp, but surprisingly fresh. Yamamoto pointed to a ventilation shaft. "Clever design," he said, with something like pride. "Japanese engineers, very good. Air comes in here, goes out there. Natural flow. Keep air clean." The walls were covered with marks, thousands of them, small scratches grouped in sets of 5. I realized with horror what they were. "Days," Yamamoto said, following my gaze. "Count days, count years, but after a while lose track, forget to mark, forget what day, what year, time becomes nothing." The first chamber was a storage room. Metal shelves lined the walls, mostly empty now. A few rusted cans remained. Yamamoto picked one up. "Last can of food from military. Eat in 1967. I remember because that year I count marks. 22 years I am here. Food run out. Think I die, but I don't die. I hunt. I survive." He showed me his hunting equipment. Traps made from salvaged wire. Fishing line crafted from parachute cords. Spears carved from bamboo with metal tips scavenged from ammunition. He'd become a Stone Age hunter using World War II materials. Catch rats, snakes, lizards, sometimes monkey, sometimes fish from stream outside. Eat plants, test plants, some make sick, some okay. Learn which one's safe. The ingenuity was remarkable. He'd essentially regressed to primitive survival while maintaining military discipline. Every item was organized, every tool had its place. The chaos of survival wrapped in the order of military training. The next chamber took my breath away. It was a shrine. In the center sat a small altar made from an ammunition crate draped with fabric. On it rested a photograph in a cracked frame. A young woman in traditional Japanese dress, beautiful, smiling. This was Keiko. Beside her photo were other items. A small flag with writing on it. Letters yellowed and fragile, stored in a waterproof case. A baby's blanket, carefully folded. And a small wooden box. "My wife," Yamamoto said softly, kneeling before the altar. "Every day I pray, every day I talk to her. Tell her I am coming home. Tell her I keep my promise. Tell her I survive." He opened the wooden box with trembling hands. Inside was a lock of black hair tied with a red ribbon. "She give me, before I leave, piece of her, so I not forget." I had to look away. The devotion, the loyalty, the love preserved across nearly 80 years of isolation was too much to witness without breaking. "I make promise to her," he continued. "Promise to return, promise to see our child, promise to be good husband, good father. Every day I live, I keep promise. Every day I survive, I honor her. Cannot give up, cannot surrender, would shame her memory." I understood then. This wasn't just about military orders. This was about a promise to the woman he loved. A promise that had kept him alive when any rational person would have given up. "She would want you to go home," I said gently. "She would want you to meet your child, to live, not just survive." He nodded slowly, but said nothing. Instead, he stood and led me to the third chamber. This one was different, darker. The lamplight revealed something that made my blood run cold. Weapons, dozens of them, rifles, ammunition, grenades, all carefully maintained and organized. But that wasn't what frightened me. In the center of the room sat a large metal container. Military markings covered its surface.
Warnings in Japanese, and underneath, in English, danger, chemical agent. "This is what I guard," Yamamoto said quietly. "This is my mission." I stared at the container, my mind racing. Chemical weapons. The Japanese had used them during the war, despite international prohibitions. This bunker, this entire position had been a storage site. "You've been guarding this for 79 years? Hi. Orders very clear. Protect at all cost. Never let enemy take. If enemy comes, destroy everything. Destroy self. But enemy never comes, so I wait. I protect." "Do you know what's inside?" I shook my head. "Not told. Only told is important, is dangerous, is secret. Must protect until Imperial Army returns." I felt sick. He'd sacrificed his entire life for a container of chemical weapons that were probably inert by now. Weapons that his own government would want destroyed, not protected. "Private Yamamoto," I said carefully, "these weapons, they're not needed anymore. No one is coming for them. The government would want them safely disposed of." "My orders." "Your orders came from a government that doesn't exist anymore, from generals who are long dead, from an empire that surrendered and transformed into something new, something better." He looked at the container, then at me, conflict raging in his ancient eyes. "All this time," he whispered, "all this suffering, for this." "You were following orders," I said. "You were being loyal. But loyalty to a dead cause is not the same as honor. Real honor is knowing when to let go." He was silent for a long time, the lamp casting shadows across his weathered face. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, older somehow, but also lighter. "You are right. I know you are right. But knowing and accepting, different things." He led me to the final chamber, his living quarters. A military cot still made with hospital corners, a small desk fashioned from crates, and covering every wall, drawings. Hundreds of them, thousands, pencil sketches on any surface he could find, paper, cardboard, even the walls themselves. They were memories, his village, his family home, Keiko's face drawn over and over, imagined pictures of the child he'd never met, landscapes of a Japan that no longer existed. Each drawing was a lifeline to humanity, a fight against the isolation that could have driven him mad. "I draw to remember," he said. "Draw to stay human. Draw to not forget who I am." One drawing caught my eye, recent by the looks of it. It showed the bunker entrance with the door open, light streaming in, and a figure walking out toward the sun. "When did you draw this?" I asked. "Last week. Have dream. Dream the war is over. Dream I can leave. Dream of home. Wake up and draw before I forget, before the dream dies." He had been preparing, subconsciously perhaps, but preparing nonetheless, ready to let go. "The dream is real now," I said. "You can make it real. Come with me."
Yamamoto sat on his military cot, the weight of decades pressing down on him. He looked smaller now, more fragile, as if acknowledging the truth had drained whatever superhuman strength had kept him going all these years. "Before I decide," he said slowly, "I must tell you everything. You must know what I did, what I am. Then you decide if I deserve to go home." I sat across from him, my camera forgotten. This wasn't about documentation anymore. This was about confession. "When war comes to this island, We know we are losing. American forces too strong, too many ships, too many planes. Our commanders, they make plans, terrible plans." He paused, his hands trembling in his lap. "They tell us, fight to the death, no surrender, death before dishonor. But they also tell us something else. If we lose, if Americans take island, we must deny them everything, deny them victory, deny them resources." I felt a chill, despite the bunker's constant temperature. There were civilians here, local people, Filipinos, some friendly, some not. Commanders say they might help Americans, might give information, might celebrate our defeat. His voice broke, and I realized where this was going. My stomach turned. "We receive orders, terrible orders. We are to eliminate potential threats before we fall back to bunker positions, before we seal ourselves in." He couldn't look at me. He stared at his hands as if seeing blood that wouldn't wash away. I was young, 19 years old. I follow orders, always follow orders. That is what good soldier does. Tears streamed down his face now, cutting paths through the dirt and age. There was a village, small village, maybe 30 people, women, children, old men. My squad, we go there. Our sergeant, he says they are enemy sympathizers, says they will help Americans, says we have no choice. I sat frozen, unable to speak. "I don't shoot," he said quickly, desperately. "I cannot. I stand there, rifle in hands, and I cannot do it. But others do. Others follow orders, and I do nothing. I stand and watch and do nothing." He looked at me finally, his eyes pleading for something. Understanding, forgiveness, condemnation. I didn't know which. "When Americans come, when we seal bunkers, I think it is punishment. I think I am in tomb, my tomb, for my sin, for my cowardice, because I did not stop them. I did not refuse. I just stood there." The confession hung in the air between us. Here was the truth, not a story of noble survival, but of guilt, of a young man who witnessed atrocity and did nothing, then spent nearly 80 years punishing himself. "That is why I cannot leave. That is why I stay. Not just for orders, not just for promise to Keiko, but because I don't deserve to go home. Those people, they never go home. Their children never see them again. Why should I be different?" I struggled to find words. As a researcher, I'd read about the atrocities of war, the things soldiers did and witnessed, but reading about it and sitting across from someone who lived it were two entirely different things. "How many were there?" I asked quietly. "In your squad?" "8 of us, sergeant and 7 soldiers. I am only one who doesn't shoot." "What happened to the others?" "All dead. Some die when Americans attack. Some die in other bunkers. Sergeant die in explosion. By 1946, I think I am only one left, only one who knows what we did." "Did you think about telling someone? Confessing?" He nodded. "Every day. But to who? Americans gone, Japanese defeated, no authority to confess to. And if I confess, I dishonored my unit, dishonored my country, dishonored memory of dead comrades. So I stay silent. I endure." A terrible thought occurred to me. The chemical weapons? Were they ever used? "No," he said firmly.
We have orders to use them only if base is overrun. Americans come too fast. We seal bunkers before we can deploy. Maybe that is mercy from the divine. Maybe one sin prevented." He stood slowly and walked to his altar. He knelt before Keiko's photograph. "I write letters," he said, gesturing to the yellowed papers. "For 79 years, I write letters to my wife, tell her everything, every thought, every regret, every day of survival. I think if I write it down, maybe somehow she knows, maybe somehow she forgives me." He picked up one of the letters, his hands gentle as if holding something sacred. "In last letter I write yesterday, I tell her I am tired. Tell her I am ready to stop. Tell her maybe it is time to face judgment, divine judgment. And then you come, you knock on door, like answer to prayer." The pieces fell into place. The recently cut vines. He'd been preparing to leave, to finally end his self-imposed exile. My arrival wasn't coincidence, it was timing. "You were going to leave," I said, "even before I came." "Maybe, thinking about it, but scared. Scared of outside world, scared of judgment, scared I don't deserve to see sky again." He turned to face me, and I saw the real question in his eyes, the question he'd been asking himself for 79 years. "What do you think?" he asked. "You know what I did, what I didn't do. Do I deserve to go home? Do I deserve to meet my child? Do I deserve peace?" This wasn't a question for a researcher. This was a question for a human being, for someone who had to look at this broken, ancient man and make a moral judgment. I thought about the villagers who died, about their families, about justice and vengeance and redemption. I thought about the 19-year-old boy forced to choose between obeying orders and his conscience, who chose neither and paid for it with nearly 80 years of isolation. I thought about mercy, about forgiveness, about whether anyone had the right to forgive on behalf of the dead. "I think," I said, slowly, choosing each word carefully, "I think you've punished yourself more than any court could. I think you've carried this guilt for longer than most people live entire lives. I think the divine, whatever name you call it, is more merciful than you've been to yourself. But those people are gone, and nothing you do now will bring them back. Staying here won't resurrect them. Dying here won't give them justice. But living, telling your story, making sure the world remembers what happened here, that might mean something." He was quiet for a long time. "My child," he finally said, "what if they hate me? What if they blame me for abandoning them?" "I might," I admitted. "Or they might understand. They might want to know their father. They might have questions only you can answer. But you won't know unless you try." He looked around the bunker, at the life he'd built in the darkness, at the shrine to a wife he'd never see again, at the drawings on the walls that showed a world he'd left behind. "If I go, I need help, need to report what is here, the weapons. Cannot just leave them, must do this right, must do one thing right."
"We'll do it together," I said. "We'll contact the authorities. We'll make sure everything is handled properly. You won't face this alone." We sat in that bunker for hours, talking. Yamamoto told me stories I'll carry forever. About the war, about the friends he lost, about the long years of isolation, about the times he almost gave up.
and the small things that kept him going. He told me about the monsoons that nearly flooded the bunker in 1952, about the earthquake in 1976 that collapsed part of the entrance, trapping him inside for 3 months until he could dig his way out, about the fever in 1989 that nearly killed him when he lay on his cot for weeks, delirious, talking to his dead wife. He told me about the moments of beauty, too. The time he saw fireflies in the jungle and remembered his childhood. The morning he heard birds singing a song his mother used to hum. The night he saw the moon through the trees and felt, just for a moment, connected to something beyond his prison. "You know what the hardest part was?" he asked as the lamp oil burned low. "Not the hunger, not the fear, not even the loneliness. It was hope. Hope was the hardest thing." "What do you mean?" "Every year I think, maybe this year someone comes, someone finds me, someone tells me it's over. And every year, nothing. Hope hurts more than despair. Despair you can accept, you can make peace with. But hope keeps you bleeding, keeps the wound open." He looked at me with those ancient eyes. "You brought hope back. After I finally let it die, you brought it back. That is kindness and cruelty at same time." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "Don't be sorry. Is what I needed, what I prayed for, even when I didn't know I was praying." As evening approached outside, Yamamoto made a decision. He stood with effort and walked to his altar one final time. He picked up Keiko's photograph and held it to his chest. "I talked to her," he said. "Every big decision, I talk to her first. You wait here." He moved to the corner of his chamber and knelt, his back to me. I heard him speaking in Japanese, his voice soft and reverent. A conversation with a ghost, with a memory, with the love that had sustained him through decades of darkness. When he returned, his face was different, peaceful somehow, resolved. "She says go," he told me. "In my heart, I hear her. She says, come home. She says she waits long enough. She says she wants me to meet our child. She says she forgives me." His voice broke on the last words. "Maybe I just tell myself this. Maybe it's just what I want to hear. But I choose to believe. I choose to have faith that love is stronger than time, that her spirit knows I tried, that she understands." He began gathering items, the photograph, the letters, the lock of hair, the baby blanket, his rifle, which he handled with the reverence of a sacred object. These were his possessions, his treasures, accumulated over 79 years. "We leave tomorrow," he said. "Morning light. I cannot leave in darkness, must see the sun, must walk out like man, not like rat in hole." "We should leave tonight," I said. "Get you medical attention, food, help." He shook his head firmly. "Tomorrow. Tonight I prepare. Tonight I say goodbye. Is important. Must do this right." I understood. He was performing a ritual, closing a chapter of his life. You don't rush something like that. "You know what I learned here in all this time? War is not about good and evil. Is about scared young men following orders from old men who send them to die. And the real evil is not the soldier who pulls trigger. is the system that puts trigger in his hand and tells him he must pull it. The wisdom earned through suffering was profound. When I tell my story, he said, I don't want to be hero. I don't want to be villain. I just want to be honest. Want people to know what war really is, what it costs, not just in bodies, but in souls. As dawn approached, Yamamoto prepared himself. He bathed with water from his collection barrels. He shaved his beard carefully with an old razor. He dressed in the cleanest version of his uniform he had, patched and worn, but still identifiable. He stood before his altar one last time and bowed deeply, formally. A final goodbye to the wife he had carried in his heart for 79 years. Then he turned to me, and I saw the young soldier he had once been. 19 years old, frightened, determined, human. I am ready, he said. Show me the sun. We walked through the bunker together, Yamamoto touching the walls like old friends. At the entrance, he paused. The door was open. Morning light streamed in, golden and warm. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and stepped forward. The sunlight hit his face, and he stopped. Just stopped. His eyes closed, his face tilted upward, and he smiled. A pure, genuine smile of joy and pain and relief and freedom. I forgot, he whispered. I forgot how beautiful it is. We stood there for a long moment, this ancient soldier and this researcher, both of us crying for different reasons. Then he opened his eyes and looked at me and said the words that would end his war. Take me home, please. Take me home. And together we began the long walk back to the world.
The journey out of the jungle took 2 days. Yamamoto was weak, far weaker than he'd let on. I had to support him frequently, and we rested often, but he never complained. He was fascinated by everything: the size of the trees, the sounds of the birds, the feel of wind on his face. When we finally reached the village, Miguel saw us coming. His eyes went wide with shock and something like fear. He crossed himself and whispered a prayer. The ghost, he said in his language, the ghost walks. Not a ghost, a man, a survivor, and he needs our help. The village gathered. The old ones remembered the stories. They looked at Yamamoto with mixed emotions, some with pity, some with anger, some with simple human compassion. An old woman approached, maybe 80 years old herself. She studied Yamamoto's face for a long moment, then spoke in broken Japanese. I remember you, she said. I was child. I hide in jungle when soldiers come. I see you. You didn't shoot. You cried. I remember. Yamamoto fell to his knees before her. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. I should have stopped them. I should have done something. I'm sorry. She was quiet for a moment, then placed her weathered hand on his head. You suffered enough, she said. Go home. Find peace. It was the absolution he'd sought for 79 years, given by one of the only people who could grant it. We contacted the authorities, the Philippine government, the Japanese embassy. Within hours, they descended on the village. Officials, doctors, reporters. The story exploded across the world. The chemical weapons were secured and removed. Experts confirmed they were inert, degraded beyond danger, but still requiring proper disposal. Yamamoto's information helped them locate 2 other sealed bunkers in the area, empty but now documented and safe. As for Yamamoto, the doctors examined him and called him a medical miracle. 98 years old, malnourished, suffering from various ailments, but alive, conscious, coherent. And most importantly, the Japanese government located his family. His child, a daughter named Yuki, was alive, 79 years old, a grandmother herself, living in Osaka. And when they told her that her father had been found, that he was alive, she collapsed in shock and joy. They arranged a video call. I was there when it happened. Yamamoto sat in the hospital, cleaned up, dressed in borrowed clothes, staring at the screen with terror and hope. And then her face appeared, an old woman with his eyes, Keiko's smile, their child. "Father," she said, her voice breaking, "is it really you?" "Yuki," he whispered, reaching toward the screen, "my baby, my beautiful baby." They both wept. Across the technology he didn't understand, across the decades of separation, across the gulf of time, a father and daughter met for the first time. "Mother told me about you," she said through tears, "every day. She never remarried. She said you promised to come home. She believed until the day she died. She believed." Yamamoto pressed his hand to the screen, and Yuki pressed hers to match it. "I kept my promise," he said. "I'm coming home." 3 weeks later, I stood in Tokyo airport and watched as Yamamoto, Private Takeshi Yamamoto, the last holdout of World War II, stepped off the plane onto Japanese soil for the first time in 79 years. His daughter was there, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, 3 generations waiting for a man they'd only known through stories. When Yuki embraced him, when he held his daughter for the first time, the entire airport stopped. People watched and wept. This wasn't just a reunion, it was healing, it was closure. It was proof that even after the longest darkness, even after the deepest suffering, there can be light. Yamamoto lived for 11 more months, not a long time, but long enough to know his family, long enough to visit Keiko's grave and tell her he kept his promise, long enough to tell his story honestly and completely to a world that needed to hear it, long enough to find peace. I was with him near the end in the hospital, his family surrounding him, his daughter holding his hand. "Thank you," he said to me, "for finding me, for bringing me home, for letting me be human again. You were always human, you just needed to remember." He smiled. "I see Keiko soon. I see her and tell her I'm sorry for being late. Hope she forgives me." "She already has," Yuki said, squeezing his hand. "She told me so, in my dreams. She said she was proud of you, proud you survived, proud you came home." Yamamoto closed his eyes, and the smile never left his face. He passed peacefully, surrounded by love, no longer alone in the darkness. His story sparked conversations around the world about war, about loyalty, about the cost of following orders, about forgiveness and redemption, and the resilience of the human spirit. The bunker was preserved as a historical site, a memorial to the soldiers who fought there, to the civilians who died there, and to the man who survived there. Not as a hero, not as a villain, but as a human being who endured the unendurable. I returned to the site 1 year after finding him. The jungle had already begun reclaiming it again, but a path had been cleared.
a small plaque had been installed. It read in Japanese and English, "Here lived Private Takeshi Yamamoto, 1945 to 2024. He kept his promise. He came home. May his story remind us that peace is precious, that war affects all it touches, and that it's never too late to choose compassion." I stood there in the jungle, listening to the birds sing and the wind rustle through the trees, and I thought about the old soldier who spent 79 years in darkness, and I hoped wherever he was, he'd finally found his light.